I think the big misconception that a lot of people have about producers is they think producers are people who just find financing for their films.
I immediately fell in love with the story and the script.
We were looking for an arresting image that could be well represented in like a little icon on your TV.
There's something about bad sound that just reads as cheap.
This was a case of bend over and lose your filmic virginity, but you'll get a movie made and your name will be on it.
Anytime there's like that amount of money, there's going to be lawsuits.
There's nothing more important than the safety and the health of everyone who's working on a production.
It was like a passion project. They said, we want your movie. It was a bidding war. It was a major bidding war.
You can't buy that kind of publicity.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the last episode of this season of Producerville. We thought our last episode would be kind of cool if we told you who we were and talked about the project that we're working on. Nate and I are currently working on a really fun, exciting documentary we're producing, and we thought it would be cool to share with you what we're doing for that.
Yeah, so the project is called Unknown Dimension, the story of paranormal activity, and it tells just that. It tells the story of the making of the Paranormal Activity franchise, which I personally am a huge fan of. I, saw the original back before it even opened nationwide in theaters. It was one of my favorites still in my memory. It's one of my favorite experiences I've ever had in a movie theater.
Me too.
Yeah. And the movie holds up so well still till this day. If you watch it, it almost works better at your house when you're watching it because of the nature of the movie, the way it was shot and taking place in a modern house. And, I'm a fan of the sequels. I just followed it for a really long time. And so I'm really excited to be co-producing with Anthony.
Unlike Nate, I was not really sort of into the whole series. Let's put it that way. I thought when we embarked on this endeavor that I had only seen the first 3 movies, but I actually had seen the first 4. And I had no idea there were 6, right? There's 6 movies in the franchise. So I had no idea. So Nate had to point that out to me. And so I have since fallen in love with the series because it really is really, really well done. Massive success for a $15,000 movie. So what happened was my company, MasiMedia, has produced a whole bunch of documentaries in the horror genre. So we've done one on Halloween, Friday the 13th, Psycho. We did one on Scream. So Nate one night texted me.
I think I texted you and said, I have an idea. And you were like, oh no.
All right. Just so everyone's listening, Nate always texts me like crazy ideas at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I always go, oh no. And wait, let's sidetrack here for a second. One of those ideas was a party at the Scream house. That's the house that they filmed the movie Scream at, that last act of Scream. Like that was a text that came in at 1 o'clock and he's like, let's party at the Scream house. Well, I'm streamlining the story, but a year later we were partying at the Scream house with hundreds of fans and it was amazing. So when Nate says I went, it's like sometimes these things can turn into crazy endeavors.
I believe it was another text that was just, I have an idea, and that turned into a phone call because what had happened was I had just finished introducing the original Paranormal Activity to my son, Channing, who was not, he's 10 now, he was 9 at the time. It's crazy to think that's how long we've been working on this since the idea, I slowly introduce him to all sorts of movies. But of course, he likes horror, and he knows that, especially these movies that I'm really a big fan of, that I have this, I call it useless knowledge, but apparently it's not very useless because it's gotten me places. About how they're made, and he's really interested in stuff like that. After I showed him Paranormal Activity, he started asking me questions like, how did they, because he knows it's not real, but he was asking me, so, how did they do this? How did they make this happen? And how did they make the footprints in the flower? And I just was like, I don't know. And he kept, every question he asked, I didn't really have an answer for. And so I started thinking about it as we were watching it, and I was like, not that I didn't realize this, but it kind of dawned on me, like, holy shit, there's no bonus features on any of these movies, unless you count like part one has like the original ending on it. But there's no making ofs, there's no documentaries, there's no commentaries, nothing. And on any of them, any of the 6 movies, and they've been released a dozen times by Paramount, and never any special features, special editions, nothing. And I was like, that's so crazy for a series like this that's that popular. It's made that much money. And the story alone of like this person who's never made a movie before in his life making a movie in his own house for under $20,000 and it going on to make all that money, that story alone is worth telling. And it just feels like it's only ever been told in like magazine articles. And it just dawned on me that it never was properly told. And so I just was like, this is what, there's all these horror documentaries coming out, of course, the ones that Anthony's produced. And, then others have gone and done, series documentaries that cover the making of an entire series. And there's still a thing that's happening. But I just kept thinking, like, all these other ones that have been done, there's tons of information about them out there. And there's nothing about Paranormal Activity. Like, this is one that should be told.
It was when you told me there were no bonus features. I remember not believing you for like 5 seconds going, there's no way. I mean, there's 6 movies, like Child's Play. I was asked to do a documentary on Child's Play or explored it. I don't remember all the details, but the reason I didn't was because all of the movies in the franchises are so well documented with current bonus features and interviews and things like that. So, Paranormal Activity, when you told me there were 6 movies, I was like, well, by the time they got to 2 and 3 and 4, they must have had tons and tons of bonus features. And you said no. And then it hit me. It was like, well, all the movies are with, and this is the producer in me thinking, okay? So it's like, there's 6 movies. They're all at Paramount Studios, okay? None of the movies have music in them. So you don't have to license any music. Right there, that's amazing. Saves a lot of money. And if you've been listening to Producerville, you know that music's expensive. There's a very small cast and crew for each movie. That means less interviewees. For those reasons, it's like, well, there's a need for it in the marketplace. If all of these other franchises have these, big documentaries and retrospective, whatever you want to call it, and yet here is the most successful, if I'm not mistaken, horror franchise in the whole industry, why isn't the story being told? So for all of those reasons, I thought this is a really great, opportunity. So the first thing I did was contact my really good friend, Rachel Bolofsky, who is a producer on Unknown Dimension. And Rachel runs Screamfest LA, which is LA's #1 horror film festival. Her festival discovered Paranormal Activity. So back in 2006 or 2007, we get it right in the documentaries, but right now I'm trying to remember. Yeah, Oren Pelly, who is the writer, producer, director, submitted the film to Screamfest, just like he did to a bunch of other festivals. Everyone passed, but Rachel. She saw the movie and said, "Oh, this is so great, and I've got to have it in my festival." And she screened it, and Paramount showed up, and she basically got the movie in front of Paramount. And as they say, the rest is history. So Rachel was a good friend of mine, but I thought, you know what? Her festival discovered it. Maybe we can tie the festival into it some way. So I immediately contacted her, and this is we're telling you this because it's a producer's. This is how the producers put it together. So Nate came up with the idea, or Channing came up with the idea.
Right.
Idea, gave it to Nate. Nate came to me, and what did I do? I started going out to the one person who I thought could really help me, and that was Rachel, because I thought if her festival discovered Paranormal Activity, she's got to be in touch with Oren Pelly. And when I called her, she said, absolutely, I'm still in touch with him and Katie Featherston and Mika Sloat, who are the leads. Those are the 2 actors in the movie. And she said, give me today or tomorrow to reach out to all of them and see if they'd be interested in doing an on-camera interview. So Nate and I were talking, like, it was like we agreed that if those 3 were not on board, this wasn't happening.
Yeah, and that was actually something you had kind of taught me about even way before this, when you were talking about, I'll let you explain it, but you always want to go for the most important people first, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. And I learned that in my very first live event that I produced. I also produced the Halloween Returns to Haddonfield 25th Anniversary Convention, which took place in 2003 at the South Pasadena Convention Center. And when Mustafa Akkad, who was the executive producer of all the Halloween movies, when he said yes to come make an appearance at the event, everyone else said yes. Well, most everybody. Same thing happened when I did my Scream documentary. It was, if Wes Craven said yes, everyone else fell in line. It's, oh, Wes is doing an interview? Cool. Then I'll do mine. So, we don't want to start with an unknown actor in part 6. You want to start with the big fish. And so
right.
Said, give me 1 or 2 days. And she called Oren and everybody. Well, within a couple of hours, she emailed me back and said, everyone is interested. They think it's a really cool idea. And I mean, I was like the holy trinity of Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
Get those 3. And with their interest, it made sense to seriously talk about this and put it together. So another thing as a producer, when you're making these independent documentaries, I mean, we didn't have funding. Well, my company has grown accustomed to sort of fronting expenses where needed. So at some point somebody has to put up money to get things in motion. Well, the great thing about compared to when I did documentaries way back when I did my first Halloween documentary to now is, rental equipment isn't that much, and you don't have to go through rental houses anymore. There's a couple of really good websites. So if you got a pencil out, make a note, producers. If you want to rent cameras, go to sharegrid.com. It's ShareGrid.com. That is a database of people like you and me that own, camera equipment of some kind, and we're willing to rent it out. So like right now, I have a whole bunch of Canon cameras. I have 3 of them. I'm not using them. So if I was on ShareGrid, I could say, hey, they're $30 a day, whatever package I want to throw out there, and people would rent directly from me. It's kind of like eBay, but it's for rentals. It's hard to explain, but just go to ShareGrid. You'll see what I mean. Usually when you go to a rental house to get cameras, they're very expensive, number one. Number two, you have to provide an insurance policy that you have to go apply for and then add them as named as an additionally insured, because you have to understand, say you're renting, we had the EVA 1, the Panasonic EVA 1 4K camera. That's what we ended up using for Unknown Dimension. If you rented that at a production house, it might be like $150 a day, but then you have to understand they're giving you a $15,000 or $20,000 camera package. So you have to have some kind of insurance to give to them in case you run off with it, break it, damage it, or whatever. Well, ShareGrid has this really cool feature where you click a button and it adds the insurance for you. So if you don't have your own insurance company or policy, you just click this button and you pay for it for a one-time use. And it's like $90, something like that. But you have to understand how amazing that is to a guy like me who's rented a whole bunch of camera packages throughout the years. And it's like, my God, this insurance is such a pain, because sometimes the insurance can be like $1,500 and it's just so cost prohibitive. So as a documentarian, I have found a couple of really great resources. I'll tell you about another one later on, which got us our rental studio, but I'll save that till later.
ShareGrid was really cool because, as we discovered, kind of doing this process together out there, that it doesn't just offer cameras. Like, you could rent anything, like lighting kits and the cards that go in the camera. It was just crazy. It was a really good service.
For example, we needed an extra media card, right? Just to have a backup, because the media files are so huge. Another thing, when you're shooting 4K, your cards get filled up very quickly, right? So
they're like $200 or $300 a card.
Right, exactly. ShareGrid, you get people in the area that are like, they're like, well, I'll rent it to you for $15. So there's the benefit of ShareGrid. Like, you don't buy anything, but it's like using a community pool. Like, you pay $15, you go jump in and splash around and leave. Like, you just want to use it while you need it. And so Nate and I rented a whole bunch of cards one day. We were driving around sort of LA, and one time we just drove up, this guy ran out and he's like, hey guys, how you doing? And he handed us the card and we drove off. And it was really kind of cool to know that we could we could actually begin the production this way. It sounds like off the cuff and like, really, that doesn't sound like a professional production, but it's like, that's what you do nowadays, especially when you're making a documentary. I don't know about a feature film. A feature film might be a different, you wouldn't be so flippant about it. You want to lock down a camera package and be more prepared. But, also another thing when you're doing interviews is you get them when they happen. So you might get a phone call that says, "Yep, we're ready to do your interview, but you have to be here, on Thursday." And then suddenly you just returned your camera package and it's like, damn it, I need another camera package. So that's the way sort of documentarians work is, very piecemeal, and they assemble it over time.
Basically, in a nutshell, Anthony and Rachel kind of worked together in getting Oren, Katie, and Mika's interviews secured, because one of the big things that I think I brought it up kind of early on was like, well, Oren doesn't live here anymore.
Right. That's right. He lives in New Zealand.
Yeah. And I believe that it just kind of worked out perfectly where around the time that we were talking with Rachel, who was talking with Oren, that he was like, oh, well, I have a trip planned later this year and here's the days that I'll be there.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of said, okay, now we know when we're doing those 3 interviews. Like, we're basing it off of when we're doing Oren's.
Right. I mean, think about it from a cost perspective. We either fly to New Zealand and get his interview, or we get him in LA where most of us lived. Now, you're not in LA, but the rest of us lived here.
Right.
So he's like, guys, I'm going to be there anyway. It was like, yeah, that's when we're going to be doing it. By the way, let's talk about how we landed the director, because, you don't just have producers, right? You've got a crew. So what happened was Rachel and I were talking, and Nate, and we were all talking about who was best to direct this. At one point Nate, you had suggested I directed, and I was like, I was like, took a deep breath. It was like, I don't really want to, like directing. It sounds like a lot of people in this town want to direct. I'm a producer. I directed one of my documentaries once. I'm pretty good at it. I just don't want to do it, and it's like, I want a director that I know is going to do a great job, and I have faith in them. And directing is not easy, especially for a documentary. There's so much that goes into it. So we had put together a short list of people, and one of them was Rodney Asher. Rodney was the director of the Stephen King Shining documentary called Room 237. And it wasn't like just a documentary. It had this conspiracy angle to it. And so we were thinking about, well, Paranormal Activity is really playing on our fears of the unknown and ghosts and things that go bump in the night. And so he was on our list because we thought he might bring not just the story of Paranormal Activity to life, but also this tapping into pop culture. What is it about ghosts that has us in the palm of its hand all the time and all of that? So I actually met with Rodney, and Rachel was supposed to go with me the day we met him. And she called me that morning and said, I broke my leg. I'm going to the hospital. I was like, what? She's like, yeah. And anyway, long story short, she's fine. She healed, but she broke her leg. Should have been a sign. But no, Rodney was amazing. We had a great conversation. He ultimately passed on the project. So what happened was this, and this is the funny thing about networking in Hollywood in general, is the director we ended up with, I happened to bump into at a going away party for my friend Gloria. So I had just come back, bear with me for this story. So I had just gone to New Orleans to go have a business meeting. I had that meeting. It was a good meeting. I came back and my friend Gloria had a going away party. So I was so tired. Anyway, I told her, yes, I'm coming. So I got in the car, drove over there, and, I'm mingling and everything. And I see Gloria, I give her a hug and all that. And who do I bump into is this guy named Nick. And I was like, oh, Nick, how are you doing? Because we have a mutual friend. He's there with a guy named Joe. So Joe and Nick and I start talking, and it's Joe Bandelli, who is now the director of Unknown Dimension. So Joe says to me, wait a minute, are you the Anthony that my friend Cameron told me I should meet because Joe had just moved here? And I said, yes. And we ended up talking. And long story short, Joe is the director of the documentary, and I would never have even considered him if I didn't just bump into him, And so it's a very important sort of note about networking in the business. The thing about Joe is that he asked me when I was at the party if I had heard of a movie called Hell House LLC. And at that point I hadn't. And he said, oh, well, I'm the producer of it. And I was like, okay, great. I made a note to watch it. And I thought, oh, such a nice guy. Let me go watch this movie. And Joe said they had made 2 movies in the series. There's currently a 3rd one, but when I was talking to him at the party, they hadn't yet filmed part 3. And I said, hey, where are you filming it? And he said, Pennsylvania. And I said, my friend Nate Ragon lives out in Pennsylvania. If you need anybody, I'm sure he'd love to come on down and help you. He's a great guy. I just sort of sang your praises, Nate. And he did. And so when he went to film the movie, he actually called up Nate and, and you went down and helped him, right? And you ended up in the movie.
Yeah, several times. It was very, it was a crazy, awesome experience. So yeah, that was my first time meeting Joe. I mean, of course we had, corresponded online back and forth to kind of get everything worked out. But the first time I met Joe Vandelli was pulling my car, parking in front of Hell House, literally Hell House, and Joe walking out and saying, are you Nate? And I said, yep. And he goes, welcome to Hell House. I still remember that moment. I was like, oh shit, I'm really here.
Very cool. Well, also, let's point out, the Hell House movies are found footage movies.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that even when he was telling me, Joe was telling me about this series, I wasn't even putting together that it was found footage and that he'd even be on the radar, but go ahead.
Yeah. So we were, I had been there for quite a while, was helping with the movie, was kind of basically just shadowing Joe. He let me try pretty much anything I wanted to try. He said his goal was to make sure that I was kind of had my hands in everything at least once, which was amazing. And throughout the course of the day and night, I just noticed like his just passion of obviously making films, but he was very passionate about found footage. One of the moments that we got, we're able to have like a couple minutes to ourselves and kind of take a break from everything. And we were just kind of talking back and forth about everything. And subject came up of like, well, what else are you working on? And what are you working on? And I started talking about Unknown Dimension. And I believe Joe had already known about it, of course, because, talking with you. So
Right.
he kind of had an idea of it. And he's like, yeah, what's the status with that? And I just said, oh, we haven't done the interviews yet. We're getting Katie, Mika, and Oren booked. We're getting that all figured out. And I said, Anthony has been meeting with potential directors. And I said about you meeting with Rodney Asher, who directed like The Nightmare and that Room 237, and that he ended up passing on it because there were reasons, but he just passed on it. And I was like, so that's kind of where we're at. And Joe just goes, I would fucking love to direct that.
Right. That's right. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah. And I was like, are you serious? And he's like, dude, you have no idea. And he just kind of just started telling me, how much he loves those movies, especially the original. And, like I said, just I could just see that he was, he didn't say, oh, I'd love to direct that because I'd love to direct a documentary or I'd love to direct anything right now. He just was like, no, I love that movie. And his passion was just there. And obviously he had experience and it was very clear that he knew how to produce. He knew how to direct. So I just kind of said, oh, that's awesome. And I just, I kept it to myself. And then I think whenever I got back the next day, I immediately was like, dude, Joe wants to direct this.
Right. That's exactly what happened. And I remember thinking like, really? Because I'm remembering now that we're talking, I had asked him if he wanted to be interviewed, because then as we started putting it together, I thought, well, he's making a found footage movie. And then I had since seen Hell House LLC and I loved it. I loved it. In fact, I had lunch with Joe to tell him how much I loved it. And him as a director sort of never entered my mind because I saw him as a producer. But I thought, well, we're going to do interviews. And also when you do a documentary that's looking at, a bunch of movies, it helps to have interviewees to be objective. And the way you do that is you have people like Joe Bandelli, who had nothing to do with the Paranormal Activity movies, but made a trilogy of movies himself that were successful in the same genre. And then you get them talking about, Paranormal Activity, whatever. So I just thought he'd make a great interviewee. So when it wasn't until Nate, you told me that of his enthusiasm, that's what it was. I remember thinking like, well, if the guy's that enthusiastic, he's the right pick. Because again, I can't stress, directing is not something you phone in, especially for a horror movie retrospective. You have to be passionate about it because every frame matters. You have to address every question the fans want to ask. You can't leave anything out. You can't phone it in or it's going to be really bad. And I've seen documentaries that are phoned in and they just, scratch the surface. They don't dive. And so I thought, well, let's talk to Joe. And so I emailed Joe and said, hey, just wondering, kind of getting an interest check. Would you be interested? Yeah, I said something very generic, like, what do you think? And he wrote back this resounding, yes, 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 yes. Like, it was like, look no further. I was like, oh, okay. So Joe ended up being our director, which was fantastic. But from a producing challenge, you have to understand we had no money other than what I was willing to front from MasiMedia. Normally, when you bring a director or a writer onto a project, you make an offer, and that means money. Well, we didn't have money.
Right.
So I said, and nobody, so they're very small team. So it's me, Rachel, Nate, and Joe. And I said to Joe, listen, I can't pay you. I'm just letting you know I can't pay you. Now, my company's made a whole bunch of documentaries. Whenever I say to somebody, I can't pay you, I feel awful. But I wasn't getting paid. And I was putting in the seed money because I knew this would sell. I just knew it would. Just because the confidence of my other projects, it's like, if you build it, they will come. So I don't know if the deal is going to be fantastic or crappy. I know it's going to go somewhere. So I'm not going to put my time into something that I know is going to be a dead end. I just won't do that. But I was passionate about it because after I had seen all the 6 movies and I love part 5 and I thought, oh, there's a really juicy filmmaking journey story to tell here. So we all agreed to kind of take that next step. So what I did was I figured out where the movies were filmed, and Nate was really helpful. And actually, it was you that told me where all the houses were. And I ended up finding all of the people that lived in these houses. So we ended up filming Oren, Katie, and Mika, the Holy Trinity, right, in the house where they filmed part 2. So we set up a day. Everybody came down. We filmed those interviews. We had rented the Panasonic Eva 1. I had paid a cinematographer to sort of help Joe, with the DP responsibilities. Nate flew out. We just put it all in motion. And, it's not expensive. For a couple $100, we were up and running. Now, the house wanted some money as well. So that was an added expense. But, what you do is you keep a budget. And so I was just tallying everything up, and I figured, well, when the day comes when we make the sale, you will just make sure that my company's reimbursed for those expenses. But here's the thing that happens. You've got the Holy Trinity. So you start reaching out to everyone else, and suddenly everyone else wants to do an interview because Oren did one, Katie did one, and Mika did one. So the ball is in motion. So that's what your job primarily was.
Yeah, after the initial 3, because, again, Rachel was the absolute best possible way of getting those interviews. I mean, there's nothing that I could have done that she couldn't have done in, 2 seconds. But so my main task originally was, after we got those 3 interviews, was to start lining up the other interviews. So now you have the first movie's basically done, because again, it's like Oren and Katie and Mika, and that's it for the first movie for the most part. But then you get into the sequels where you have different directors, you have different writers, you have, new cast members in each one. Of course, one of the good things about landing Katie and Mika early on was we were able to get like Katie and Mika to talk about all the ones that they were a part of. And, Oren being a producer on, most of the sequels, we were able to get his thoughts and experiences on the entire series. So we got all that knocked out. But then, like I said, you get into the sequels and you've got like people who like they're just in one movie. Like you have a whole cast that was just in 2 and they don't come back for any of the others, and then 3 and 4. So yeah, and I'd never done anything like that before. And Anthony had warned me several times that it was going to be a lot of work, more than I was probably anticipating. But he told me, he's like, I feel like you're the best person to do it because you're good at finding people and reaching out to people and getting people to talk to you and to respond to you. So he displayed confidence in me, which helped me out. And he kind of just gave me a basic rundown of like, this is what you need to do and this is how you're going to do it. And you're going to use IMDb Pro to get all of their contact information that you need. And just here you go. Here's your tools and go play. Go make it happen.
Yeah. And what you realize, it's 1,000, emails and phone calls. That's what it is. It's a lot. It's just back and forth until they say yes or no. And
I very quickly had a newfound appreciation of any documentary that I'd ever seen and future ones that I had watched since, because, as a fan, you don't necessarily understand how difficult stuff like that is, or you don't necessarily think about it.
Yeah.
On a fan level, you watch a documentary and you go, well, how did they, you watch His Name Was Jason and you go, well, how did they get everybody from part 1 except for Kevin Bacon? And it's like, do you not, then you have the job of getting these people in a chair at a specific time for an interview. And then you realize like, oh, I get it. I understand. I'm just grateful they got who they got.
Yeah. You said it exactly. Like when I've done hundreds of interviews, and when someone is actually sitting there and you turn the camera on, in my head, I scream. I'm like, yes, because it's like a score every time it happens. It's like, we not only contacted them, they said yes, and then they didn't cancel the day of. They actually drove their butt there, and then they walked from the car to the place, got in the seat, and signed the release form. I mean, it's like a New Year's Eve celebration every time we do an interview. So one rule we try to do is we never reschedule anybody. So if somebody says, yes, I'll be there Thursday at noon, the last thing you want to do is try to reschedule that person, because you'll probably lose them. And, so it's a very amazing thing when the interviewees actually show up. So you mentioned His Name Was Jason. I want to just very quickly talk about, we did 85 interviews in a 10-day period. Let that sink in. That's insane. That's 8 interviews a day, right? And of course we did a couple, after that, like maybe 3 or 4 or something after that, whatever. But we had to produce that entire documentary from beginning to end in 13 weeks. So that was a nightmarish situation. Unlike Unknown Dimension, where, we have maybe 40 interviewees, we could shoot them within a year. That's another reason. I've been through the nightmare production, and I just don't ever want to go through it again. There's no need to willingly put yourself in that situation of it being a nightmare. So here It was like, great, we got Oren, Mika, and Katie. We thought what we do is book maybe a 2-week period, like a soundstage somewhere, and then, months later, and just have enough advance time to schedule everyone during those 2 weeks. Well, that's not what happened.
So you don't necessarily run into as many issues as you would doing a narrative feature, but you still run into issues. We had the issue at the studio towards the end with some of our interviews.
Oh, yes. That was a nightmare. Talk about nightmare. Okay, so this is a good time to bring up the other website that I was going to mention. So when you're shooting a documentary, right, you have to have a place, like any production, to shoot it. So when we did His Name Was Jason, there was a really great studio in Burbank that we rented out for 10 days, and I paid them a bunch of money every day. And it had like everything. It had the craft service area, it had the makeup area, it had a little office and seating area, and then it had a green screen room and all of that. It was like a one-stop shop. But it's super expensive. Now my company's financing, right? So I'm trying to do this on a budget that gets us the production value. So there's a great website. Take out your pencil and paper. It's called peerspace.com. It's P as in Peter, EER space.com. And if you go to Peerspace, it is just like that ShareGrid website. It's people like you and I that have spaces to rent. So we might have an extra bedroom. We might have, you know, a house in the backyard, like a pool house. We might have an office in a building, whatever. It's any kind of space that you are willing to rent out on a daily or weekly or weekend basis, whatever. So I went on to Peerspace. Now these, the Peerspace, ShareGrid, we didn't have these 6-7 years ago. So these are tools that really helped Unknown Dimension. So when I discovered Peerspace, we found this little studio in Burbank. It was just a room, and it has a bathroom and a room, and a little refrigerator. That's all you need. If someone comes in for an interview, you just need to have a space for them to look good, feel good, look professional, you know, not some like closet, like some walk-in closet somewhere, you know, something respectable. Well, I think they wanted like $50 a day, something like that. That's more than a bargain. So anyway, sometimes those bargains turn into problems. And one day, Joe and Rachel and I showed up to do an interview with, I think it was 3 people. 2 of them rescheduled. And we were bummed because we're like, oh my God. Once, you know, again, when talent reschedules, you really risk losing them. Well, the third, we scored 1 out of 3. I'm so glad the other 2 people canceled, because we walked into this space to flies swarming everywhere. I'm telling you, 150 flies flying everywhere. And it was like, you can't have that. You're shooting an interview. You can't have flies in your shot. And we could not believe our eyes. So Joe was taking like a notebook he had, and he was like literally killing them, like swatting them in the air. Rachel was doing it. And so I had to run out and get bug spray. So I like literally was like, I'm in Burbank. Where do I know? There was a sporting goods store like 3 blocks away, and I drove in, and I went running in there. I was like, where's your bug spray? Where's your bug spray? And they were like, the guy pointed. I was like a manic, crazy person. And so I bought all this bug spray, and I came back and I started spraying, and then it smelled like bug spray. And I was like, oh my God, our interviewee is going to come in and they're going to smell poison, and that's not appropriate. So our interviewee came in, and I don't want to say who she was, just to not say who she is, but she was so nice. She went with it, and we just kept apologizing, and we didn't kill all the flies. There were flies coming in and out of the shot, but we were just dumbfounded and embarrassed. It was the one time where I was super embarrassed doing an interview. And I told her that, and I emailed her, and I said, I'm really embarrassed, but thank you so much. It was the worst thing to happen. So anyway, by the way, we called the owner of the person that rented this to us. She didn't believe us. And I was like, you need to come down here. And she did. And she saw all these dead flies everywhere. And she's like, I have no idea how this even happened. So crazy stuff like that happens. And, there's more to the story. Like, we had flies again on another day, and it was just one of those things. But, you have to kind of be ready for everything. The issue with me about being a producer is no matter how hard I try to project potential issues that could happen, you can never foresee something like a fly infestation. You can never see stuff like that happening. So you just have to prepare yourself mentally and say, look, I'm ready to go regardless of what happens. And I think you can't crumble. You have to take control. That's the thing about being a producer. The show goes on, and now you're invested, right? Because people are coming through the door and they're doing the interviews, and then they leave and they tell everyone, we had a great experience. You should do an interview too. So once it's serious, and you got to just handle anything that comes your way. But I have a picture. I think I have a video of Joe swatting flies on my phone.
So then, at some point, it was kind of later into, I don't want to say into the production, but later into we had already got several interviews. I'd say maybe 70% of them.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them.
75% of the interviews were done, and I'm on social media in the morning as everybody is scrolling around, and boom, I see on all the horror sites that Paramount has announced that they have a 7th Paranormal Activity movie in the works that I believe at the time was slated for 2021. And at first I was like, is this good or bad? Because now are we telling the definitive story now, considering that there's about to be 7 of these movies and we're telling the story of 6? So I wasn't sure. So I immediately sent it to you and said, is this good or bad?
Right. And I remember jumping up and down, well, figuratively, I wasn't really,
right.
But I remember going, yes. So everyone listening, if you're a producer and you're going to do some kind of retro like this, in the middle of your production, if you find out that a studio is making another movie based on the subject matter of your documentary, all you have to do is scream and shout, because that's a wonderful thing to happen. Because in 2 of my documentaries, Still Screaming, which is the Scream retrospective, and his name was Jason, there were movies coming out that justified the existence of those documentaries. And what I mean by that is Paranormal Activity, the story of Paranormal Activity, is amazing and fascinating and incredible and eye-opening and jaw-dropping, but who cares if the buzz is gone? If there's no buzz around it, it's a little bit too late, or it feels arbitrary. It's like, oh, we're going to tell you this amazing story. Now, it doesn't mean you can't still make a documentary. And remember, I had consented to do this and went ahead and put money into it, not expecting a 7th movie.
Right.
I knew it would find a home, but when that happened, it just gave us the permission to knock on Paramount's door and say, we've already done all this work and we'd like to do this for you. And that's exactly what we did. And to prove what I'm saying about this, the Psycho Legacy, which was the documentary on the Psycho series that my company produced. Think about this. It was Psycho. There were 4 movies in the series. There's a television show that had come out years ago. All this other stuff. Nobody cared. Universal Studios, they made all the Psycho movies, had no interest in distributing it. And when we distributed it, we ended up at the Shout Factory. They picked it up. They saw value in it. But it was the 50th anniversary of Psycho. So this was 10 years ago. This year is actually the 60th anniversary of Psycho. Wow, time flies. Even in the 50th anniversary, they didn't want it. And it's Psycho, So that's the risk, So as soon as Nate told me about Paranormal Activity 7, I was like, oh, wow, we're going to be talking to Paramount. And long story short, that's what happened. Now, mind you, we had been knocking on their door for a year already, trying to get them excited about this. And I've paid their licensing group for tons of footage in the past. I know the people over there, but there was no traction. The moment they announced part 7, Rachel found out the right person to contact, and we were in there to have a meeting. And we met with 5 people, and they all said, yes, we want a documentary. And they were blown away by the work we had done up until that point, because we just pushed a piece of paper towards them that listed all of the interviewees we got. And they said, are these done? Like, you already have all, like, Oren actually did the interview. I said, oh yeah, we're done. And we just need like 5 or 6 more at that time. And so they were just blown away. So then began the challenge of negotiating that deal. And so it takes a long time when you're negotiating with a studio. And then when the pandemic hit, because all that happened before the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, everything was so uncertain. So we're happy to say now that we have made a deal with Paramount. It's been signed. They're financing it. And, that's maybe a whole other discussion. But really, that's been the trajectory of Unknown Dimension up until this point. And it was starting with a great idea. Nate and Channing both had a really great idea about, look, this is necessary. Like when you think about it, when you're an artist, this is maybe going off on a tangent, but you tend to want to justify your existence as an artist. It's kind of hard for me to explain. It's like singers, dancers, producers and stuff. It's art. and it's kind of arbitrary, right? It's like what I'm passionate about is different than what another artist's passion is. So you kind of have to sort of justify it. Well, the way in my head, I feel like, well, the way I'm justifying it in my head is fans are going to receive this and they're going to love it because we put the effort into it. So we're bringing value.
Ask yourself when you have like something that you're like, this is an amazing idea and I think this is what we need to do next and this is our next project. Kind of always ask yourself, does it have a reason to exist? Like what is the reason for this to exist? Now, that doesn't mean that just because you can't come up with some amazing reason for something to exist that it shouldn't be made, but it's a very important question that you kind of taught me that you kind of have to ask yourself. And that reason can be anything, but you should be able to find a reason.
Yeah, and we've asked people in the series in Producerville up till now, it's like, what was it about the story that you wanted to tell? Why was this story compelling to you? You know, and you have to have that answered in your head. And I'm not just talking about writers and directors. I'm talking about as a producer, you need to, why do I want to tell this story? Because what happens is you end up spending a lot of time of your life on this particular project. So if you're not, the phrase I use is in love, but if you're not passionate about it to the point where that passion can sustain you through the finish line, you know, that's another reason why I didn't want to direct it, because I felt I wouldn't have enough passion to sustain the directing. I think that's really what happened. But if I had a director that I have faith in, like Joe Bandelli is an incredible asset to this production. And he's proven over and over again how valuable he is and how much he understands the material. And, you know, I'm just so excited that he's part of the team. So that's just, you know, a lesson. I mean, it's filmmaking, regardless if it's a documentary, a short, a feature film, whatever, you know, you have to, it's like running a marathon. It just is. It's a lot of work. It's enervating. You lose hope. Like there was a time, I'm just being honest, in the middle there, it was like, you know, Shout Factory passed on it. Now I've done business with the Shout Factory. Okay. They passed on it. And I was like, this is Paranormal Activity and there's no bonus features. They passed on it. And you never really find out the reason why. You just kind of get a no, you know, and I've known the people over there. So it's like, they don't want it. We went to another smaller DVD distributor. They were like, yes, we want it, but we don't want to pay for it. Like, that's what they said to us. And we're like, that's not how it works. You know, we were kind of running out of options, and, you know, self-distributing is another way to go as a producer. A lot of people make their own DVDs and sell them and stuff. I just didn't want to do that. So when this movie was announced, it just gave us the fuel to get it over to Paramount, and in no uncertain terms, they were absolutely excited about it. And the way it works when they announce something new, and I've done this with Scream and Friday the 13th as mentioned, is your format for your story is you look at the past and then you come to your ending of your documentary and you turn towards the future. And so, like in Scream, we talked about the first 3 movies, and it was when Scream 4 came out. And then we talked about how great the next movie is going to be. You know, that's kind of how you structure something. So that's exactly what we're doing for Paranormal Activity. And Paramount has said they would like us to get to the set of the new movie so that we could interview people, and just enough to kind of create a buzz at the end of our documentary. And they're using it as a tool to promote the next movie. And so, you know, you can kind of see it win. Another thing is, producers, I'm always looking for win-win situations. And when we brought this to Paramount, I remember going to the meeting with Rachel, and we were both saying, oh, you know, there's no way they're going to say no because of the value we're bringing to them. In other words, like they could have said to us, thanks guys for all your hard work. And we could have given them a great idea. And believe me, as a producer, that's happened to me before, where you go in all guns blazing and you put an idea on the table and then someone just takes it and does it without you. And that's a very real risk. And it sucks when it happens. But if you go to those people with footage in the can, like we did, all these people interviewed, the locations we got inside, and you go and you put it in front, they can't do that. They could have said goodbye and then tried to call everybody and said, hey, we're doing our own thing. But they were smart enough to know to not do that. And so what did they do? They included us, and they paid us. And so, yeah, it was just a really good arrangement. Let's put it that way. So
yeah, I remember it was kind of early on, like maybe a week or so after we had got the initial 3 interviews, and we had a discussion about like, well, what if Paramount blah 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 blah. Like we just kind of had a discussion about it, and you were like, "Listen, we're good." And you said, "You were like, Oren lives in New Zealand." You were like, "You think that Paramount is going to get Oren Pelly in New Zealand to sit down and give them a 4-hour interview like he gave us?" And he's like, "You're like, it's not going to happen."
Right, exactly.
You were like, "We're good. We got this."
Especially after meeting Oren, because Oren is
Right.
not Oren is done with filmmaking. Like that's one thing I found fascinating about him was he made millions and millions and millions of dollars, and then they came to him. I mean, I'm not joking when I say that. The guy spent $15,000 and made millions and millions. It changed his life. He was, I believe, he was a statistician or something, and then like left his job and became this filmmaker. And he wasn't even a filmmaker. That's the thing. This was the first movie he had made. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I can't wait to unleash this story, because if you're a filmmaker, you're going to watch it and go, "Oh my God, this is amazing." But after meeting him, I thought there's no way he's going to do another one of these.
Yeah, if it wasn't, honestly, if we didn't have Rachel, like I don't know if we would have got Oren interview. Like it would have been, I don't want to say we wouldn't have got it, but it would have been very difficult to get.
Yeah. Another thing that, now that you say that, is something I've learned is, and I've learned a couple of very hard lessons as a producer, and I don't say that lightly. One thing that I have to say out there is be very careful who you work with, and that you're not giving away the producer credit is so important on a movie. The last thing you want to do is share that credit with people, or a person or people who don't pull their weight or don't earn it. So when I called Rachel, she discovered Paranormal Activity. So right there, she's got access I don't have. I'm certain she kept in touch with Oren, and when she said yes, I was like, she needs to be a producer on this, because if you bring me Oren, Mika, and Katie, you've brought so much just in a couple of phone calls. And Rachel's been amazing to work with. She's been right by my side. We have done everything together, and I'm privileged to work with her. She's an amazing person and hard worker. And and I look at the entire team, and I just feel so lucky, including you, Nate, that everybody is involved in the capacity that there's no fat in it. Let's put it that way. There's no like excess. There's no dead bodies, so to speak. And it's a great place to be, because I've seen the opposite, and it's always difficult. Then there's resentment and all that stuff. And, but yeah, it's going great. So here's where we are. So the pandemic hitting us really slowed everything, not just our documentary, but Paranormal Activity 7 as well. The movie is supposed to be coming out next year. They've pushed it another year. And so like everything else, things have been pushed. Well, right now we're just about to start editing. So everything's been kind of like quiet, because we've been negotiating this deal since, my God, we met with Paramount last November. It's been almost a year since we've had that meeting. Think about this. It's November. It's been almost a year. This is so like, clearly you're not doing this to pay your rent or mortgage. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, this is the life of a filmmaker or a documentary filmmaker. This is the longest production I've worked on, but there's been a pandemic. So we can all blame it on that.
So that's always going to be part of the story, though.
Right. Exactly. Right. Oh, another fun little story. Who said story? Just to let you know, when we met with everybody last November at Paramount, there was 5 people. It was this big conference room. And it was 5 ladies. First time I had ever had a pitch meeting with all women. It was amazing. It was just very noticeable. The Me Too movement was just very noticeable there, and they're all fabulous people. So it was me and Rachel. I was the only guy there. And I'm saying this because I'm just noticing, I've been around for a while. Like, I've never had that happen. And everyone at Paramount has been nothing short of amazing to work with. So anyway, all 5 women. So we leave. We get home, and I get this email from a woman that was in the meeting, and she emailed everyone that was at the meeting, and she said, "Guys, I just got back to my office. I walked in." She goes, "My Paranormal Activity poster that was on the wall," she goes, "which is bolted to the wall, fell down and shattered when I walked into my office." And she's like, "It's bolted to the wall." She's like, "I don't understand how that happened." And we're like, "That's awesome. Like, what the hell?" Like, I heard that, and I went, "What the hell is that?" Like, I've been, and so of course we're all like, it's Paranormal Activity, you know, and it was just a sign of something good. I don't know, but yeah, but listen, so we're halfway through everything, and we've done a lot to get to this point. And Nate and I thought that as we close out this season, this first season of Producerville, we can finish this conversation about what happened from this point forward, about the editing and the delivery and the reception and timing it with the new movie and all of that when the time comes.
I think it should also be said that it's not like we took this idea and went to Paramount and they were like, great, it sounds good, here's all this money, go make this documentary. Like, it was just the four of us.
Yeah.
Like the idea happened, I took it to Anthony got Rachel involved, Joe got involved, and then it was just us, and we just did it ourselves on our own, and we didn't go to Paramount until we were pretty much, you know, you could argue that we were done. We were pretty much done with the interviews. Like you said, there was a few that we still wanted to get. There's a few that we'd still like to get. Basically, you can do this. Like, anyone can do this. You don't have to be involved and have, like, you know, a budget from Paramount, or you know what I mean?
You're touching on something interesting. I took a distribution class. In LA, there's all kinds of seminars and things like that on filmmaking. And so back when I was doing my Halloween documentaries, that was my first one, and it hadn't come out yet. So this is probably 2005. I found myself taking like this, you know, 1-day seminar at some, like the Hilton or Sheraton, you know, in Studio City, whatever. And I remember the guy that was giving the seminar was a documentarian, and he said something that I have learned is true. And he said, when you are a documentarian and you're pitching a project, there are two main questions that you have to answer. And the first one is, why you? Like, why should I work with you? And basically what they're asking you is, you know, what's your experience? And what is it about you that makes you right for the job? It's kind of like applying for a regular job. Like, why should we work with you? Well, for me, that answer now is because I've done a whole bunch of these. We've done Halloween, Friday the 13th, Psycho, Scream, Hellraiser, you know, like I can rattle those things off. So I quickly check off that box, right? The second question is, what's your access? And when I hear that, we've interviewed Oren, Katie, and Mika. That's our access. We've already interviewed the Holy Trinity. And they're not going to do another interview. And we've already got 15 others set up. So our access is everybody in the cast and crew is already working with us. So right there, we've checked off 2 of those boxes. So think about what happened when we went to Paramount. That's exactly what I did. Oh, and by the way, when I went to the Paramount meeting, I brought a backpack, and I unloaded all my other documentaries, physical products. I laid them out on the table, encouraging them to pick them up and look at them. Now, their home video department was there. So she was picking them up, and she's like, oh, this is great. I love this packaging. And this one folded out, and this one had like a secret insert or whatever. And so, you know, they saw that we knew what we were doing. So if you are like, now I'm just saying that from a place of experience, but if you are a first timer and you don't have those things, don't let it deter you, because sometimes your enthusiasm enough. Like I did Halloween. So that was a first time, you know, and they had faith in me. And, you know, so I think what we're just trying to say is this is kind of like, just do the first one and it'll open the door. Jason Paul Collum, who was an interviewee a couple of episodes ago, he made October Moon. The success of October Moon landed him the funding to do November Sun, which was the sequel to that movie. So it's the same thing in this industry, is the more experience you have, you know, the better. So, but if I want to go, you know, suddenly do a movie, some religious movie, whatever, I don't know, and I don't have any experience doing that, none of my documentary stuff is going to help me, you know. So I think that's the point, is like, if you just start, the ball will keep rolling and it'll get easier. And I think any filmmaker, anybody in a job, if you're applying for a job, you start at the bottom and you climb your way up. It's the same thing. It's harder as a filmmaker, let's put it that way, than like a job factory, but that's typically what happens.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at earlier with when I was saying about how, you know, you're an experienced producer, you have all these productions behind you that you've done that speak for themselves. But like I said, you didn't need to go to Paramount in the beginning and say, this is our idea, give us money and we'll do this. Like we just
Right.
kind of did it on our own. And it kind of reminds me of, I remember a long time ago. I believe, I don't remember, maybe I do remember the title. Shout Factory was rumored to be releasing a special edition of a horror movie that I was a huge fan of. And I believe I contacted you and was like, oh my gosh, something I've always wanted to do was visit the locations of this. And I don't even know if I could, they're so far away, but I think it'd be cool if they did like a piece to show like the locations then and now. And you were like, yeah, totally, do it, go for it. And I remember I asked you, and this is before we had worked on all these products together, I was like, so I should reach it, because that's what anybody that's not experienced would, that's the thought they would have. It's like, okay, so I'll just email Shout Factory and tell them, hey, I'd like to do this, and what do you think? And I presented that to you, and you were like, no. You were like, go there, shoot it, do it, edit it, and then when you know they're doing it, go, hi, I'm this person, and here's what I have.
Yes.
And I was like, that's amazing. Now, I wasn't able to do the thing that I had presented to you, but I remembered that advice, and I was like, okay, so he's literally saying, like, no. You don't approach them first. You make it on your own, and then you go to them and say, hi, you don't know who I am, but this is what I have, and please buy it from me.
Yeah. Because think about what you're doing. You're way far ahead of anyone else that's coming to the table. And even if someone else someone's excited, they say this other person is more exciting than you for whatever reason, or they're a great director, you've still got all this stuff in the can. And I think that's a lesson to be learned, is don't just talk and don't keep your hand out open asking for money from everyone. If you can just go pick up a camera and shoot an interview. Back when we did the Psycho Legacy, I think I was trying to tell this before, maybe I got a little derailed, but the director of that's exactly what he did. He saw me make Halloween and Friday the 13th, and he picked up his camera and started doing interviews for Psycho. And I remember him calling me and I remember him saying to me very clearly, you've inspired me to do this. And so he was just shotgunning it. Whenever he would get through to somebody, and he's like, where do you live? North Carolina? Great. I'll hop in my car. He lived in New York at the time. He's like, I'll drive to North Carolina and get an interview. That's exactly what he did. And the Psycho Legacy he brought to me, and I basically helped package and sell it. I really didn't have anything to do with it other than that. But like it was advice, like I've seen that work over and over. And now if you go look at Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and all, so many groups of people that are just doing exactly that. Sleepaway Camp, like they just take it upon themselves. And so if you're doing a documentary retrospective and you're passionate about it, you want to just put it in motion and see how far you get. And that's been like the story of my life. Like my whole career has been like that. It's like, well, someone's got to start it. Great. I'll put in the money and let's do it. So we have a great editor. His name is Nick, and he's a friend of Joe's. And that's the guy that I met when I was at Gloria's going away party. He's the guy, I had worked with him on another DVD I had worked on for a magician's instructional series. I had worked with him on that. And so I happened to bump into him, and there he was with Joe. And so this is how things happen. So anyway, everybody, thank you for listening to Producerville. We thought what we would do is throw out 12 interviews with producers, see how it goes, see what we learn, and then close out our season and kind of reflect on it and think about when we're going to pick up again. We definitely want to do a season 2. Keep subscribing. Don't unsubscribe us, because then when season 2, episode 1 kicks in, you'll automatically get it. And so it's been a privilege having these conversations. So we will see you sometime early next year. And thank you again for listening to and supporting Producerville.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.